Hello. I'm going to go on a little bit about Roaring Spring. There's a story which I tell again and again when I'm in Roaring Spring and I meet somebody new that doesn't know me, and I try to explain who I am and why Roaring Spring interests me. And it's the story of Frank Bradley Camp. I'm Frank Bradley Antonson. Now, Frank Bradley Camp is my uncle, and he was killed in World War II. A pilot shot down. But when he was about 5 years old, I think, his father, my grandfather, J.J. Camp, uh, moved. They didn't sell the farm up in Cherry Tree. I don't think that. No, I don't think. No, they didn't sell it. Oh, maybe they did. But in any case, he moved. He moved to Roaring Spring, which is about, I don't know, 70 miles away. Grandpa Jim had studied uh, agriculture at Penn State. He was a scholar. He was a good student. I have his notes. But in any case, he became the milk inspector in that area, and he moved his family down there to Roaring Spring. He was married to a woman that I barely remember at all, Minnie Martha Nancy Bottenhorn Camp, when she was married. And she was, I think, 7 years older than he was. But in any case, she was a nurse, his nurse, while he was recuperating actually in a hospital from being sick with something in State College. Well, they had three children, my mother, her younger sister, and her still younger brother, Frank, and they had them all in fairly rapid succession. So they grew up, Frank, from the time that he was 5 or so uh, till when he left for World War II. Roaring Spring was his hometown. But I think I'm sure they always had retained a love of farming, and that came down through to me. Uh, well, anyway, he was, I think he was very well liked in the town. He was an athlete. He and a man named Palmer McGee, uh, a, a descendant of the founders of McGee Dairy in Roaring Spring, which has since closed. Pal, they called him. The two of them were best friends. They were on a basketball team together, and it was an award-winning team. Now remember, this is a small town. It's not like Altoona at that time, but uh, I think he was quite well liked. Well, he chose to go into the war before the United States actually officially was in the war. When he joined as a to fly a Spitfire for the British RAF, isn't it? The British, well, I don't know, the British Air Force at the time, and he was trained quickly in Canada. I think he was maybe in Brazil very briefly, and then uh, it was in Morocco where they were stationed, and it was over North Africa that he was shot down. Uh, he kept a diary, which we have, and he wrote letters home to his grandfather. Well, he was one of two who were killed out of Roaring Spring uh, that were killed in World War II. The other man's name was Ray, his last name. I don't know much about him. But the American Legion, I think one of the lodges, not exactly in Roaring Spring, is called the Ray Camp Lodge, after this Ray, who I'll learn more about him, and then Camp, my uncle Frank Camp. So a lot of them recognize that. As a matter of fact, when I was at a cafe telling this story about 3 days ago, there was a woman sitting there listening as I was explaining this, just, and she said their story is up on the wall down there at that lodge. I've never seen it. I don't know exactly where it is, but I got a pretty good idea. So she knew and piped in with that. Well, before Uncle Frank was killed, he wrote home to his father and said, "Would you please buy me some land?" so that when I get out of the war and go home, I can farm. And Grandpa Jim did that. And while Uncle Frank was still living, I'm quite sure. And he bought this land, 600 acres, very, very cheaply. I think it only cost a little over $3,000 for 600 acres, maybe a little bit more than that. But this was in the 1940s, and it was, farms were being sold for almost nothing at that time. Plus, it's not good soil. It was for the timber, mainly. But anyway, Uncle Frank never came home. He was lost in action, shot down, and the remains were never found. But Grandpa Jim kept the land and then farmed it, sort of, did his best to farm it, more like he ranched it. Its nickname was the Camp Ranch. That's why we've got the Camp Ranch campus. When I came down as a boy, after I lived in Roaring Spring. I was born there, and I lived there until I was about 4. But after that, my parents and family moved to New Hampshire. And I should also say that Grandpa Jim ended up having 8 grandchildren, 5 to my mother and father, and 3 to my aunt and uncle. Of the 8, there was only 1 boy, and it was me. And then when I was born, I was named after Frank Bradley Camp. Yeah, I'm Frank Bradley Antonsen. I told you that. All right, now that meant, and I loved coming down to visit Grandpa Jim because it was only a few weeks in the summer I lived for it. I explained that before. That's how I got really to love Roaring Spring. But I also loved coming out here to the ranch anytime I could. And that's how there's this split between the Camp Ranch campus, where I've lived now for 50 years, I think, straight, or a little bit more, when I finally got back, which is a whole other story, which I think I've told elsewhere. I don't know if I'll tell it here. But so there's this place, and there is Roaring Spring, where my youngest sister, my mother first, and then my youngest sister eventually bought the house that Grandpa Jim had lived in. So my connection to Roaring Spring goes very deep, and it's schizophrenic in a way, in that Roaring Spring is a town. This is very much country. It's rougher than a farm, but I love them both. And so now that there's not only the Camp Ranch campus, Frank School Online, but there's also the Roaring Spring campus of Frank School. I just decided to announce it and create it. It has no official existence other than that. Bye for now.